Welcome to The Great Awakening. I'm your host, Josh Dawes. Today we have a very special guest that I am so excited to share with you. Doug TenNapel is a 30-year veteran of video games, comics, and animation, and the legendary creator of Earthworm Jim, a massively popular video game in the 90s. He has worked with some of Hollywood's biggest names like Steven Spielberg, and he was the showrunner on the Netflix reboot of VeggieTales for DreamWorks. But Doug is more than just a creative powerhouse. He is a strong, outspoken Christian who has faced the challenges of the entertainment industry and survived cancellation for his Christian beliefs. His life and career is the subject of the first episode of a new series on Canon Plus called Makers. We watched it last week as a family and everyone loved it. If you're not subscribed, you should be. In our conversation, Doug shares a wealth of invaluable insights for aspiring creatives and underlines the importance of boldly standing by our beliefs, even in the face of opposition. It's a great conversation about popular entertainment, one of my favorite subjects, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. So without further ado, let's jump right into my conversation with Doug.
That was a quick intro. Thanks for having me, Josh. I appreciate it. This is going to be great.
Yeah, I have been so excited to have you on. It's not something I get to talk about a lot on this channel, entertainment and the arts, but I'm a huge fan of both. And so I'm excited to kind of dig into this and talk about it from a Christian perspective. First, though, for our audience that may not be familiar with your work, who is Doug TenNapel and what are you about?
Well, I'm a Christian first. Family man second. I have a wife and 4 kids. We went through, I was born and raised in California, born in LA, raised in the San Joaquin Valley and farmland, and then went down to San Diego, where I went to school at Point Loma Nazarene College. I was a Nazarene back then. And then, but I've always I'm a painter, I'm a doodler, I'm an animator, I'm a director, I'm a writer, actor. I've always been, I love the arts. I love creating and I love making. So I found it at my first Saturday morning cartoon I was an animator for. I was a lead animator on Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. This is a
Nice.
Marvel weird.
Yeah, I remember that.
So that was 1991, I think. And then that got me into video games down in San Diego. And I animated on a number of games, including doing puppet animation for Jurassic Park Genesis was the first game I was a lead on. And then that opened up, I worked on the Ren and Stimpy game. And then Earthworm Jim. So that was my big ticket item that it was game of the year. It was very animator centric. I created all the characters and had an incredible team where I was one member of the team. I wasn't in leadership. I was just the guy that came up with the characters in the world. And then I pitched it through that company, Shiny and Playmates Toys, to Universal. And they picked up the TV show. So I was an exec producer on that. And I got to be more involved in voice records. And I met with the lead writer and kind of learned more about writing on that stuff. Then started my own company called the Neverhood, which Spielberg and Katzenberg and Bill Gates funded for 3 games. We did a puppet animation kind of themed games, very artsy, very strange. And then I ended up getting into graphic novels and comic books, where I basically did one graphic novel. Those are long form comics. That is like around 200 pages or so. I did a graphic novel a year for 20 years. And then I would sell the intellectual property rights into Hollywood. So I've sold Ghostopolis is at Disney, and I've sold them to Sam Raimi, to just Universal. And then I realized kind of right around 2010 that we were in too big of a house in Glendale that we couldn't afford, and just the tax situation and the fluctuating of my career. We needed to get out, just couldn't afford it. And I got California in my blood still. Like I love the beach. I love the food. I love the weather. I know all of the roads and streets. all from LA all the way down to San Diego. Whereas here in Tennessee, I've been here for 10 years now and I'm still lost. And then more recently, so I got Nickelodeon did Cat Scratch. So that's one of my shows based on one of my comics that I got to be a lead on. And then just did a bunch of other projects, in Hollywood. Well, DreamWorks and Netflix ended up acquiring the rights to VeggieTales. So they hired me and moved our family out here to Tennessee in 2013. And I was the showrunner on that, put the crew together, redesigned the characters. Great, incredible crew. And we did 153 shorts in 3 years without a break, one a week for 3 years without a break. One of the lowest budgets at DreamWorks of their 20 series. Ours was the only one that was on time and on budget consistently. Just pulled off a miracle. So I really love that project. It was the only project I ever worked on that I did not own, since the very beginning. So everything's been my own stuff. So it always felt like I was in someone else's yard.
Yeah.
Using the bathroom,
Yeah.
And then after that, I just realized there was no way I could go back into Hollywood because I was kind of canceled over opposing same-sex marriage and being very explicit and outgoing about my faith, very blunt about my faith. So I started doing independent comics through Kickstarter and Indiegogo, and I set the record on Indiegogo with the Earthworm Jim book. We raised $815,000 for a comic, which I put all the money into the book. So it's hardbound, gold gilded edges, oversized, just a giant. I made these big, beautiful, obscene tomes just over the top. And I did 4 of those books. And then I got into YouTubing, politics mostly. So I do these very pro-Trumpy, pro-conservative, pro-Republican. So they're for that. And then I attack the left hard on my channel, and it blew up. So I've done about 7 YouTube channels that YouTube kept destroying the old ones. They would just vanish them and go, you said something wrong. It might be I might have shown me like unloading my guns and stuff like that. So they didn't like, and I opposed COVID and the election results and stuff like that just got me into trouble. So now I played a little safer, and I've got currently 440,000 subs on YouTube, and that's my main full-time job. It's the most money I've ever made in my life. So, and I have a beautiful, big audience. Mostly retired people are in my audience, and I love what I do. It's a lot of fun. That's what I mean by I'm an actor, where I perform every day on camera, which is a slightly odd thing to do. But I have a theater background. I'm 6'8". I'm an introvert, but because once I got tall, I go, I can't hide. So if there's a microphone available, I'm going to take it and go. And that's pretty much where I'm at.
Yeah. And when you say an actor, these are your beliefs. You're just, performing them, for an audience. And
yeah. Like if I was going to talk to you like this, if you were sitting in my studio with me and we had a cigar, it'd probably be very low energy. My friends, when we meet, it's very quiet. It's very, so what are you doing? But you go on camera, you can't do that.
Right.
That's bad quality. So it's like, hey, everybody, let's go, and I can do that for 5 minutes at a time.
Yeah. Now that's what fascinates me about your story. Cause it's not something I've talked about a ton on the podcast here, but I have a background in entertainment. I've worked in Hollywood. We were out there for about 8 years or so, our family. Mm-hmm. And you begin to meet a lot of Christians, and kind of the standard operating procedure is keep that quiet. You're there to hopefully make a positive difference, and you kind of keep that under wraps. Have you always been this vocal about your beliefs, or is that something you kind of decided you couldn't be quiet anymore?
Certainly gotten more vocal, but I've always been pretty vocal about my faith. It's like, because I love it so, and I have so much anguish over my fellow fallen man that I want to give them an answer, and I feel like they're all lost, just spinning their wheels. So there's a frustration to it. There's an anger to it, definitely. at sin and at fallenness. And I'm trying to emulate God's, I think I'm emulating God's passion on the subject. It's kind of the most important one. So, but definitely being more vocal and blunt about it is a personality trait also. I don't believe that everyone is as shy as they are about it. I think that really is, a lot of it is shame. But, I've met just so many people in the industry, hundreds of them, Simpsons animators, storyboard artists, King of the Hill. And I've also had a lot of, every kind of secular person imaginable on my projects whom I love. So drunkards, trans people, gays, the blue-haired kid, radicals, absolute leftist radicals who I would consider friends and I love. So I also love, it's not just like brutality, it's also passion and great love for people.
Yeah. Well, and if we truly love them, we don't want to just leave them, headed off a bridge, it's like, start waving. Yeah. Hey, you're headed towards destruction.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I'm doing my job. I'm not doing it well because at times the blunt and brutality and insult I enjoy too much. And so that's my, the Bible warns about the tongue just throughout all the scriptures. And I get it. It's like, Doug, a fool gives full vent to his anger. So don't relish this and go off. And there's some weeks, a lot of times where I have to go back and say, you crossed a line and you know it. And you can't just say, it's covered with grace and my intention is good. I just don't give myself the benefit of the doubt ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And being out in Hollywood and knowing Christians in the industry, it seems like there was maybe starting out, there's this kind of a belief that, we're going to be a faithful presence here. I'm not going to be public about my faith until I've reached some level of achievement. And then I can really use my influence for good. Do you think that's a valid strategy?
I've heard it so much, and I've probably even practiced it myself. A lot of my boldness comes from having an established career. And, but I don't believe in that strategy as a virtue. I can't back it because it assumes that if you gain enough credibility and power in the world, then you have permission to tell the truth. And that obviously can't be true. And especially in the New Testament, probably in the Old Testament too, God is finding people with the exact opposite, like low status, disgraced. He goes, I'm going to work with you because the people, once they're plugged in, I've got nothing for the big, famous, important. So I'll work with the low, even the prostitute, I'll work with you. See him and favoring, say, the youngest son instead of the oldest. So he's actually telling the opposite story of that strategy because then it really is his work and you don't take credit for it was me. It was my influence on culture,
Yeah. And it seems to just having the insight of kind of watching people's journeys over, more than a decade, you can kind of see some people who take that approach end up becoming more conformed to the world than having any sort of influence on the world.
That's human nature. It's why you can't marry women from an idolatrous world, Or I remember growing up and there was this Nazarene, my utmost for his highest, this Nazarene, or this devotional. And one of them was a guy had a canary and he wanted to teach a sparrow how to sing like a canary. So he put a sparrow in the cage with it and the canary started chirping like the sparrow instead of the sparrow singing like a canary.
Yeah. That's, it's interesting. It's been frustrating to see the trajectories of where, close friends have like ended up, employing that strategy. And it seems like to me, and I was, I'm sure I employed it when we first got there as well. It seems to me that if you're unwilling to speak the truth when you have nothing to lose. It's only going to get harder when you have everything to lose.
When is it a right time to really upset someone?
Right.
Andrew Klavan said on his show, which I think was a disaster. He's one of my mentors, who I really admire. And he said, you don't understand, if I witnessed to Ben Shapiro and he became a Christian, it would just, upset his whole family. And it just sounded like such a wrong answer. After what Jesus did for us, hangs on a cross in shame, naked, brutalized, and I'm going to start counting the cost on my career, my friendship status. That's a lot of where my bluntness comes from, is I'm so clear on my loyalty, is what it's like in The Count of Monte Cristo. When Jim Caviezel has that guy, Jacopo, pinned on the beach and he beats him in battle and he has a knife on him. And he convinces the pirate leader to spare Jacopo, right? He goes, "You'll look good. You'll get a loyal guy." And he goes, "Okay." And Jacopo looks at him. He says, "I'm your man forever."
Mm-hmm.
That's us. To me, that's like the clearest us to Jesus. It's what he did for me. It's I'm your man forever.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing even comes close. And it means that you really understand what Jesus did for you, that there's no, and I think the early church or some Christians are maybe a little more clear on that the world just can't hold, it should not be able to purchase a Christian with benefits of the world.
Yeah. And two, I think that it's interesting that you say that, because looking back, we moved out there to pursue the dream and it didn't, work out the way that we had hoped it would. And kind of had to unpack a lot of kind of deal with the death of a dream and stuff like that. Yeah. But looking back, I see that
I've had to do that too on some of my dreams, just so you know.
Yeah. I think it's common to human nature. We can't chart a course to exactly where we want to get to. We have to kind of be open to where God is directing us. But looking back on my own journey, I was going out there. I want to do things for God. I want to take culture. I want to this. And I love the way that you said that, where it kind of flips it around. It's like, I need to be more focused on what Christ has done for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then that frees me from the shackles of trying to please, trying to play the game, trying to gain that influence so that I can do something for God. It's already been done for me. He doesn't need me. So wherever he wants me to serve, then great, I'll serve there, Lord.
And the world goes after power centers. That's one thing the leftists do, is they're just, man, if there's a teachers union or a leadership position, they want to take it over because there's no immaterial value, no world. Mm-hmm. So it's all power. It's all survival of the fittest, And then the Christians are just adopting that system. If we go, I got to make it in Hollywood because Hollywood's important. I used to remember I worked with Ben Affleck for a while, and some people were saying, if you could just convert Ben Affleck, then, we could really do some good work. I'm just going, God doesn't need Ben Affleck,
Yeah.
And it says a lot about our Christian culture that we're in the world, and then we're also in the world, instead of in the world, not of it. We're admiring those power structures too much, and Hollywood is one of them. Disney is one of them. I'm not saying you have to fight it, because we also have Daniel working for Nebuchadnezzar, but he wasn't sitting there going, I have to convert Nebuchadnezzar before God can do what he needs me to do here. Instead, he does this smaller local thing, even when they're being thrown in furnaces and all that. I just think we can give up this micro game, which all the New Testament is focused more on all of us personally being holy and obedient in small things, and then he'll give you bigger things. But it doesn't say in the New Testament, our assignment isn't go for power structures, convert the president, go be the president. It just never says that. Instead, it's like how you treat your servant or your spouse or your children or your enemy, personal enemy is what it's obsessed with. So I go, why? He could have this is inerrant word of God. He could have given us any assignment. And I just see kind of most of our Christian tactics in trying to make it in the world not part of that assignment.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like, step back from kind of the power centers and Hollywood and stuff. I think in a lot of times, just even in our churches, we think of ministry as something that happens out there. That's something that the missionaries do or the pastor does. Or if, we're personally going to be, volunteering in the church, and we neglect the ministry of the home. And I like that you talked about that in the documentary. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you've kind of tried to, pass these values on to your kids?
Sure. And if you ever met my kids, it's probably a mixed bag on which one they've picked up, but they're great kids, but they're kids. and three of them are in college and one of them is in high school, just so you know the age group of them. I think the bigger message that I had in that was I was being a little too neglectful of my family and trying to power play, just workaholic my way into the arts.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was fine when I was younger, but now when you have kids, it's like it kind of changes the economy of your time allotment. And it's not that I was that, I was normally neglectful for an artist, normally disconnected as a dad. and you're given these giant projects,
Right.
And I have a stay-at-home mom, so my wife is a great mom and wife. So that kind of mitigates a lot of men having to go off on a ship for 3 months and work. But the values, we put them in Christian schools. They were in public school, maybe in first or second grade. And we just said, we're going to try homeschooling. And Angie goes, trying to homeschool 4 kids. She goes, I'm not good at it. I can't do it. So we put them in a private school. And that's kind of the problem with also being a sole breadwinner of the family and being an artist is there's no guaranteed salary unless you work for a studio. That goes back to that compromise. So to me, the biggest miracle is that I've been able to pay rent for 30 years and be pretty independent. It hasn't always been good. There's a couple of years where you just eat it so bad. So that goes into being a provider for the family. And then I have too many friends that are just absolutely impoverished and poor, like their gas is turned off, because they can't afford to pay it. And you see people survive on much less, kind of the great American capitalist house and money grab and salary grab. And I got insurance. I got to set it aside for the kids' college and my retirement. I just think that's not number one mandate either.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of the reason why maybe Christians are so underrepresented in the arts is because we value those things so much. We're the responsible ones that you want our kids to go to college, have a job lined up before they even graduate.
Yeah, Josh, I agree, actually, because people have always said, why do Christians suck so bad at the arts? And I go, well, because for us, most of my secular friends in Hollywood who make it big, they have one God, and their God is being a director or writer, and they put everything into it. And I just think Christians, it's always going to be number 2 at best. So that we always have a conflicting thing, and that might be the edge it takes to knock you out of the game.
Yeah. Yeah. So what advice would you have? Our kids are homeschooled. They're in a hybrid. We've got high school down to preschool for kids, but they're in a homeschool hybrid that is arts focused. They do a great job of like looking at the arts through the lens of Christian worldview. And so my brother actually teaches some film classes there. And so I think he's showing them your Canon Plus episode this week, and then he'll probably send this to them. But he's got a lot of kids in his classes that want to go into the entertainment industry. What advice do you have for Christians?
Don't. It's not, I'm kidding. I mean, that's a giant topic in and of itself. What advice do I give to people wanting to get in? I feel sorry for them first, because I was that kid. just make sure that your motives are true. A lot of it really is still, I want to be Bono for the Lord. I want to be Steven Spielberg, but for the Lord, but they really want to just be Steven Spielberg and Bono.
Yeah.
So, a Christian artist has a different desire to make truth, goodness, and beauty, which has nothing to do often with art versus commerce, art and commerce. So there's no demand that you make a living at it. You can, you're allowed, but it's the living side of it that is kind of where they win everything. It's like, I have a wallet. So you will not do what you were born to do or what you want to do or what you studied your whole life. You will drain all of your teaching out of your art and you will illustrate what we tell you to make. And that's why we're paying you. So you will work on this film. You'll have no say. You'll work on this scene. You'll have some say, how fast do you want the character to walk across the screen? Fast or slow? We'll give you that. But you will, animate this trans character, or you're fired. So, and then what are you going to do? You're one studio job, you're one conflict with your boss away from getting fired from any job in that. And the system itself is getting more corrupt than it was. It's getting more explicit and more hostile to our values because that's what they believe they have to virtue signal to their pagan god. They have to come out and tell them, I'm on board. These are my values. And then they're going to hire a whole crew of people, lots of them Christians, and say, you will illustrate this. So as an example, people say that YouTube has a lot of censorship. I've never been censored less in my whole life than on YouTube. So if I'm working for Nickelodeon, even on my own show that I own, and I have characters doing something they don't want, they tell me, you will remove that. And you remove it to keep your job. They go, I have the money and we own it and it's our say. So they censor you, even on shows that I own. So even to the Christian, even in the best possible scenario, you own it. You're a showrunner. You're an animator on your own project. You pitched it. It's yours. You will be censored. Everything that you believe will be removed from it if your boss is a normal secular entertainment. They just don't have your values and they don't have to. It's their business is to push their values, not yours. On YouTube, if you go indie with your own animation, with your own blog channel, if you want to make yourself into a influencer or celebrity, it's the biggest business in the world. It outpaces anything in Hollywood. I think I saw Hollywood made $9 billion last year and video games made $180 billion. It's like, wow, Hollywood is nothing. And YouTube overall, I preach the gospel on YouTube. Like once a week, I do 4 videos a day. Out of all those videos, I try and preach the gospel to my audience. They've never said anything. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
To me, it's the most. So everyone is at war with YouTube going, you got to go on Rumble. Like Rumble's how you turn invisible, I want to be here. It's like Babylon giving you a megaphone and not prosecuting you. It's the cool. And when I was a kid growing up, like trying to make it at Disney, you go, how do I sneak into that front gate? How do I get past? How do I trick them into seeing my property? You could do an animated series right now on YouTube. You can direct your own small film. If you're an actor and you can't get roles, you can give yourself the biggest, meatiest role, even if you're just speaking Shakespeare. Do a short, no one will censor you, put it out there. You really don't want to do that because you want the money and the fame. Let's be honest. So that's what I mean by I'd be really focusing on the kids on why are you doing this and what do you really want? And let's be very honest.
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell my kids, like, if you get into music, and you see like this amazing concert and you want to do that, I'm going to take them to like a dive bar where the guy is playing every night. Does that look fun? Like if you would play music to this audience in this crowd just for the fun of it and go work another job, then sure, I will be all behind you pursuing
I
your
agree.
love of music.
Yeah.
But you cannot look at the Taylor Swift and say, I want to be a singer. You're not going to be Taylor Swift, most likely.
Yeah. Yeah. And the guy in the bar who's just living out of his van, playing small, but playing good, he really loves what he does. And it's great because he's not doing it for the fame. It's difficult. That's the other thing is the artist calling. The reason why I tell him like, no, don't do it. It's a difficult calling. It is a difficult job. It's not always fun. Most artists that come up to me go like, I'm failing. I can't make it. And they're very heartbroken. And I go, yeah, welcome to the arts for probably 99% of them. Yeah. So get a real job that pays. Because everyone wants to everyone wants to just paint a squiggle on a piece of canvas and make full-time income. I want to screw around on camera all day and make full-time. And by the way, even YouTube, I've tried doing an art channel where I do tutorials on it. I could not get that art channel to move, so I abandoned it. I did an animated series, my animated cat and dog thing, could not get heat on it, had to abandon it. So there's lots of, and I'm Doug TenNapel. Like I made Earthworm Jim, and I can't get heat on a lot of things. So even when you make it, it doesn't mean everything is easy. You still have to be crafty and navigate and be aggressive.
Yeah. Now, what would you say to maybe some parents that are listening that don't get their kids' fascination with pop culture and the arts and entertainment? How would you respond to maybe parents who would say that's the devil's business? We need to stay out of that and just go watch Facing the Giants again.
Sure. I don't have a problem with that. I do not. I don't think. I think if you're starving your kids of truth, goodness, and beauty, then it's like not letting them listen to something music that's beautiful, or not giving them sugar. Let's say you don't give them sugared treats. All the sugar treats are deliberately bad for you, and truth, goodness, and beauty is not. But it might be maybe you're a vegetarian household. Is there an obligation that you have to make your kids eat meat? Well, they're going to miss out on some delicious bacon, and bacon's amazing.
Yeah.
So it's not mandatory. It is largely the devil's business. So I get that. I taught cinema or screenwriting and worldview at Houston Baptist University for 4 years. And I would talk to those Christian kids there, and I'd go, we would watch Pulp Fiction, and I would show them the Bible, portions in it. And I'd go, and then I'd show them God is Not Dead too. And I would go, who here thinks, Pulp Fiction is more godly? And they would all raise their hands. And I go, who here thinks God is Not Dead too? Is a godly movie? Not one hand went up. Well, when I would go to the old people at my church, they all watch, Friday Night Lights or whatever, and God is Not Dead too. And they stood up at the end and cheered and cried. And so there's always this artsy Christian who won't be happy with, Fireproof until those old people don't want to watch it. And it's one of the most successful independent Christian films ever made. Yeah. Like when they won't stand up and cheer and they don't get a tear, when basically Fireproof, they turn it into Eraserhead or something. That's when the Christian artist is happy. There now it's deep and monstrous. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's different if you're pursuing truth, goodness, and beauty, kind of straightens everybody out. But it really ends up being as kind of a difference to what the world still calls art. Like it has to be, brutal. I don't know what Daily Wire's doing over there with their product, but it just looks like if they can make a brutal movie that would be shown in the theaters in 1995, whatever, they considered a victory. Like they're trying to go back.
Right.
But I go, that is not just brutality for the sake of brutality or whatever. So it's very complicated, that question. I get why parents are paranoid of the world, because the world, it's like opening a sewer into your home. But at the same time, I showed my kid, my son in high school, The Matrix the other night. And we all enjoyed it. And I tried to talk about kind of the Christ figure and even some of this is Gnosticism, what they're doing here. You can use it to teach great stuff.
Yeah, that's the approach we've taken. I remember when my son was probably 14, showed him Psycho. And so we started watching it, and the point after the shower scene where this perspective changes, and he's like placed the body into the car, it's sinking in the swamp. As soon as it like stopped sinking, my son said, "Oh no." And I paused it and said, "Who are you rooting for right now?"
Yeah.
That's how powerful storytelling is. Yeah. And how easy it is to be manipulated to, embrace, the bad guy. Yeah. So yeah, if
you watch it together.
Yeah.
And if you're allowed to talk about it with your kid, then it's no different than a teaching moment of if you're driving your car down the street and there's a crackhead passed out on the sidewalk and you go, "Son, see that? That's what they're offering you. That's the end game." You don't go like, "Never let my kids see a passed out crackhead in public." And they really are going to find, I don't like leaving them unequipped. So I kind of inoculated all my kids with all the arguments growing up. I'm like, they're going to push this rainbow stuff on you. And they got that loud and clear. This is socialism, guys. This is deconstruction of the scriptures. This is deconstructionism. This is just woke garbage. This is them peer pressuring you. This is them being a bully and peer pressuring you and this is a manipulative argument, And some of it sticks, but all my kids did pretty well. We'll see. Life's a long, long journey.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, on the subject of woke Hollywood, do you think there's going to be a backlash to that? Are we going to start seeing? No. Come on, man. Give me a white pill.
I can't. Yeah. If you look at what's in man's heart and just consider wokeism as a religion, right? It's not a business model.
No.
They're fitting it into a business model. It's no different than if the entire business was taken over by conservative Christians, or the entire business was taken over by Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses or Muslims, or Krishna, Hindus. So it's a religion, and a religion does not care if it loses money. They see it as that's their form of, if the world hated you, remember it hated me first. They're going, we gotta die for this environmental stuff and the gay issue. So I see no reformation there, because who's doing the reforming and what are they going to reform to? They don't have the values to look at it and they go, I don't understand why I guess we have to change the whole audience's mind and make this the new A game culturally. And that's more what they're doing, and they're losing money. And the Overton window on the world is shifting everything leftward. So Christians are far more liberal than they were 10, 20 years ago. Yeah. So it's working. So I don't see their need to change. And I think short of it all going just completely collapsing, and I don't think that is the model, because people are too addicted to games. So they're going to keep playing games. Games do really good business, and people are addicted to, cinema as part of our culture. So Dune will come out and it'll do real well. I love Dune, but I mean, just when you think like, Hollywood's finally going to destroy itself, Maverick comes out and is like this giant blockbuster, and they don't learn anything from it. They don't go, quick, let's all do that. They never came away with that lesson. Yeah. So I don't see it reforming. If anything, I see Christian entertainment trying to emulate them more. I'm a huge Trump fan. You have Trump coming out yesterday just going, abortion's a states' rights, and that's my only position on it. And in vitro fertilization, where we throw away 7 out of 8 fetuses, I totally support, because I love life. I'm just going like, well, there's my party. Yeah. I get to vote for murder or less murder.
Very frustrating.
Yeah, it's like Obama I always quote this Obama in 2008. As a Christian, I believe marriage is between one man and one woman. That's Obama. Not one Republican can say that, will say that today on the campaign trail. He had to say it to get elected.
Yeah.
And now Trump's like, he's making fun of Lindsey Graham, going, he started at 0, abortions. And then he went to 3 weeks, 5 weeks, 11 weeks, 14 weeks. He's making fun of his compromise. And I'm going like, that's now like mainstream right. That's scary.
Yeah.
So all that happens is I get more apathetic. I go, hooray, we won, but what are we?
Right. Yeah. And I think that gets back to the Christians' desire to capitulate, to be quiet, to not talk about our faith in public because of some future influence we might have. And I think that kind of idea of relational evangelism is something I talk about a lot, where we are building relationship, but we never actually get to the evangelism part. And I think, that kind of gets us sucked into the silence of spiral, the spiral of silence, where the ideas we disagree with are just louder and louder because we're quieter and quieter. And so,
and only half the time does God demand you have a relationship. The other half, he just goes, tell them to repent.
Yep.
Like, get on a soapbox. It's not your relationship that triggers the Holy Spirit to do his work and create a Christian.
Yep.
So even that strategy is conceding to the world's power and negating the Bible.
Yep.
Like, that's my message to the families and all the Christian artists and everything is, you stick to that infallible word and it will make you into a radical. Mm-hmm. It will make you into someone who is wholly unuseful to the world, like an enemy of the world, if 100%. You just obey it. And that is the North Star. So I have no other strategy than that North Star is be biblical, read the Bible, and obey it. And you will be the weirdest, oddest, psycho Christian there is, because the world's owned by, Satan is running this culture. So of course you're going to look really different, really unique. And so I just see it as a character attribute. I see it as when I see other brave lunatic Christians, I just go, yeah, that guy, he may not be the most Christian, but he certainly isn't conceding ground. He's not conciliatory to the culture.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if we look to the gospel as the power of God unto salvation, it's not our winsomeness. It's not our, ability to gain power in culture, the gospel. And when we look at what Christ has done for us, we can always look at the cross and say, I serve a God who loves me, who went to the cross for me. He's got my back. If I'm bold for him, he's going to provide for my family.
Yeah.
This is not something I need to carry that weight. Now, don't be foolish. Don't, go poke a grizzly.
That's right.
But, Christians, that's not that the C.S. Lewis fire extinguisher in a flood analogy that, the message we don't need, most Christians don't need to hear right now is be careful. Don't, be too bold. No, be bold. Come on. Let's
break some furniture, man.
Let's do it.
Turn it over, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Christianity is not at a fault of being ever too holy, too biblical, too obedient, too loyal to Christ, too not rebellious, but just having culture have too little sway on you. That's never the case. And so given that, I think even if I was going to give a counterbalance statement, I would just say, I think we need to dive in deeper, go back to, strengthen the things that remain, but go back to something greater. And it just doesn't look like that's the plan in Christians and entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
The plan just seems to be really like, we'll meet you halfway.
Mm-hmm.
I made a great film. I apologize for the message, but.
Well, rewind to the 90s.
Yeah, rewind to the 90s. The 90s were falling too, guys. I got bad news for you.
Mm-hmm.
1500s, Satan got his body count. In the 1500s, in the 1900s, and today, he gets his body count.
Yep. Well, enjoyed this conversation. I could go all day. I like to end each episode with something that is giving you hope. So where are you finding hope right now?
Oh, well, certainly God is the real foundation for my hope. Is I have full confidence in his plan and in him, and I'm loyal to him wherever he takes us. So, but like Gandalf said, sometimes it's only a fool's hope. I've been told, he says, because he's always this old fool who still believes. And I'm inspired by the idea of the Christian, is not allowed to despair. So there's no room for, if you show despair and you give up hope, and hope is that thing that just means you have confidence and you are relying on God. And so it really is, it's the end all be all of everything. It keeps me happy, keeps me alive. Even if worse comes to me, if I end up with cancer, I end up in prison, burned alive, shamed, or just a normal loser, my hope is still in God. It's not like, God, I'm gonna do this plan and I'm gonna really kill it and my country's gonna kill it, we're gonna be amazing. My hope is in and I think that comes from reading the Bible and believing it, and reading philosophers that help you understand why you should believe it. It gives you the confidence, and it's the only foundation that we know of. It's the only firm foundation that he gives us, and everything else is building a house on sand. So if there's any other plan besides that, I got bad news for your. Maybe your results might be great in the world, and you might whatever, but you're not going to get a long-term win. Our long-term win is confidence that our Father's in control. Even if he picks Biden as president, he has a plan. It never means he endorses whatever happens. If you're raped, he doesn't endorse it. He just goes, what you intended for evil, I'm going to use for good.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where my, Christians should be the ultimate carriers of hope.
Yeah.
Not a blind, dumb optimist, but because of what we put your faith in is more important than having faith, because you can have faith in a very wrong thing. It's what we put our faith in should give us absolute confidence and peace and hope.
Yeah, no, I love that. My favorite passage of scripture I keep coming back to recently is where Jonathan and his armor bearer are. They're like outside of a camp of the Philistines, and he says to his armor bearer, "Come, let's go attack those Philistines. It may be that God will deliver us, because nothing can stop the Lord from delivering with many or with few." And so that's where my hope is right now. Yeah, there's so much evidence of God doing things, even amidst the darkness. As things get worse, I'm seeing more of an openness amongst certain groups of people that have had maybe dismissed the gospel in the past. As things get crazy, they're looking around saying, something's wrong. Let's go back and re-examine.
I find that too. It's good harvest time. And I've shared the gospel my whole life and only had a few converts. So, but when they do come in, you go, oh, that's why you had me preach the gospel my whole life. So that this one opportunity would come up and this guy would come in. And that's worth sharing the gospel to a dry room your whole life.
Yep.
It's amazing. And it's been just recently that I've seen fruits.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Doug. Where can people find you and your work?
Well, they should subscribe to Canon Plus to find my documentary. That's a great thing to do. That's great. There's great material over there, very high quality, very sound, very good for families.
Yep.
And then if you want to find my show, which is pretty odd, it's Doug in Exile on YouTube. Doug in Exile. I put on political entertainment, news entertainment.
Awesome. And then over at X as well?
Well, X, that's my toilet. But yeah, I'm Doug TenNapel on X. And that is an acquired taste.
Yes.
Sometimes I go as brutal as I want there because there's no business model and I can't get in trouble on X. To me, it's like a low rent toilet. It really is bad.
Yeah, no, it's been a mess.
But that's where we find each other. You know,
Yeah.
You also find great guys and great people on there, great ideas. So I guess I'm there, you know, I'm pretty
awesome.
rank on there. I have no filter on X.
Well, I like it that way. Well, thank you so much, Doug. This has been a joy.
My pleasure, Josh. Thanks for having me on. It's very kind of you to share me with your audience.
Anytime. That's our show for today. Big thanks to Doug TenNapel for joining me for this conversation. Be sure to check out his episode of Makers on Canon Plus. If you're not subscribed, I highly recommend it. They make top-notch content, and this was no exception. I'll have links in the show notes where you can subscribe and find some of Doug's other work. Be sure to check out his YouTube channel, Doug in Exile, where he does political commentary. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with a friend. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit like and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And if you're listening, ratings and reviews at Apple Podcasts are always appreciated. Until next time, I'll see you soon.